Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Love Encompassed podcast. I am, of course, Phil.
And I am Victoria.
And we are so grateful that you are joining us here today. And I think we're excited about what we're talking about today. What are we talking about?
Today we're talking about keeping it fresh in
Ooh.
our relationships. Because for the most part, all married couples, well, the majority of married couples, I'm not going to put all. But I think we have experienced, especially if you've been in a relationship for a long time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can fall into the rut of
Same old.
And then the next thing you know, the excitement in your relationship isn't quite as what it used to be.
Yep.
You're more about schedules and things, and you just kind of sometimes, if you're not careful, can lose each other in the process.
Yeah, because it's the monotony of doing the same thing over and over and over.
Yeah.
And you kind of get bored.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, and then the next thing you know, it bleeds into your relationship. You're not going on date nights like you used to. You're not talking like you used to. The intimacy isn't the same, outside the bedroom, in the bedroom, and then the next thing you know, you just kind of feel more like roommates than you do friends. Or not friends, but partners.
So how do you, I guess the first thing is you got to recognize it, right? So how do you recognize, like, man, we are bored?
Well, I think if you have to really think about, like, when was the last time you guys did a date night? When was the last time we did a date night? When was,
I don't remember. Now that you say it.
No, that's awful, Philip, because we just had lunch last week.
We did have lunch last week. It was date night, and that's what confused me. I did not think about date day. But yes, you have to have a date night or date day so you don't forget what they are. That's very true.
But, like if you're not talking as much as you guys used to, if you're just kind of like, hey, you do this, we do that, we go here, you go there, especially when you have kids.
Yeah, and it's easy, though. That's easy to fall into because, like, you're like, all right, we need to take care of stuff. Like, you take care of this, I take care of this, and we just... Before you know it, that turns into one day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, and then it's like, oh, man.
Yeah. It's like, you're dividing responsibilities, and you're so focused on the responsibilities, and the next thing you know, it's like, well, when was the last time we invested in us because we're investing in so many other things?
Yeah.
Or,
we tell our boys all the time, it's like, hey, before there were 4 of us, there was 2 of us.
Right.
So the 2 of us have to remain strong in order for the 4 of us to really operate well.
Absolutely. Another one is, lack of communication. When you find, like, when you're not talking to each other as much. And it's not like just like, okay, like we just talked about, you do this and you do that. But it's like, hey, checking in. How are you doing? Yeah. Communicating things we may be needing that we stop communicating in our relationship. Little things like that. You have any other ideas about?
Yeah, communication, sometimes I think that people think it's like sitting down and talking, which it is. I'm not saying that it isn't. But it's also like lack of communication in the sense of like, you just kind of like, we've been married almost 19 years.
Boop, boop.
Yeah, and she's blessed. And so what can happen is you're like, I just need my own time or my own space or my own whatever. And so, but you don't communicate that. You just start acting upon that. And then all of a sudden, that if you're not careful, that just keeps continuing. Right? And continuing. And then, let's be honest. Maybe you're talking to people, and I think sometimes the worst thing for me is when you have like single friends and then they're like going out and traveling and like doing all kinds of stuff. And then you're at home, you're taking care of responsibilities, you're doing all these things. And then your friend's like, oh, in Miami this week. And you're like, I'd like to be in Miami.
You're right.
You know what I mean? But I'm running kids or I'm doing
or you can't afford to go on a trip to Miami.
Yeah. And then you're like, but then what starts to happen is you don't communicate that to your spouse. And I think that's what gets people in trouble too.
Oh my gosh.
And then they fall into that rut. Like they just fall into a rut of like, and you overthink. I think people start overthinking instead of realizing that everybody has those thoughts of like, oh man, I'd love to go on a girl's trip or a guy's trip, but you don't say that.
Yeah.
And so it's like you just kind of fall into that rut.
So would you classify that as like not communicating desires that you may have?
Yes.
So you kind of keep it.
100%.
Yeah. I would even also add in there putting up walls. Like, say you have communicated before and you feel like it wasn't received, or maybe you kind of starting to feel like if you have been in a relationship for a while, or even if your relationship is pretty new, you feel like your voice isn't being heard in that relationship, and then, or if the partner does something that really like hurt your feelings and you didn't communicate that, or if you did communicate it and the person didn't respond well to it, putting up walls. And now you just make a choice. I'm not going to communicate anymore. I'm not going to speak up anymore. I'll just kind of keep that bottled up, or I'll have, unresolved whatever frustrations. Yep. And then the next thing I know, I am falling into just, okay, you do that and you do that. Like, yep. Your heart becomes hardened towards your partner.
And you start living through social media.
Yeah, that's real.
You start getting on social media and you're like, man.
And you open up the app, and just as you open up the app, this guy is like proposing to this girl with like a bouquet of flowers around her, like multiple flowers around her on the beach, or, sweet date night, and they're like laying in the pool or whatever, couples vacay, and you're like, oh, my partner. Yeah. # relationship goals.
And then you're like, I remember when we used to do
that.
I remember when we used to do that. And I think social media can, if you're not careful, I do think social media could damage your relationship horribly.
Social media can damage your own personal confidence and psyche if you're not careful.
Yeah, because you just get on there and start scrolling, and then you're like, man, everyone else is living such a better life than I'm living. How come I'm not where they are? And then it's like, that puts you in a rut, though.
Yeah, it can.
And then if you don't communicate that to your spouse, like, hey, this is rough.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or look at these people.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Or, hey, can we take a trip?
Yeah.
Then it's like, if you don't communicate that stuff, I love what you said. You just bottle it up.
Yeah.
And eventually that stuff, whatever you don't deal with will deal with you eventually, and that stuff comes out.
Or you start resenting your partner.
Oh, that's a good one.
Resentment in relationship is real. If you allow it, which is not communicating, you did, you put an expectation on your partner without communicating it, or maybe the partner showed up one way while you were dating, or maybe in the beginning of your relationship they were firing all cylinders and they weren't doing the things that they used to do. And so, or you feel
it
like...
seemed like that came right out of your heart.
No.
That came right out of your heart.
No. I'm just thinking of different ways, where resentment can build up. Like you
start looking and you're like, well, Jay-Z bought Beyonce.
Right. Why ain't you on your grind?
Right. He's worth $3 billion. Where are you at?
Got me in this house, all these kids, and I got to work. I'm just joking. But resentment can happen. Yeah. And then that creates distance, you know.
Yeah, because then you get and you get stuck in that rut, and then what happens is, I think it's like in a car, if you get stuck in the mud and you just keep moving your tires, you just sink deeper.
Stuck going nowhere.
Stuck going nowhere, and then in reality, you need someone's help to get out of it.
That's really, really good.
And as a married couple, you may get stuck in a rut, and guess what? You need somebody's help to get out of it.
Yeah, and the thing is it affects, your relationship from a communication level, from falling into just, okay, this is what we do, to then it bleeds into the intimacy part.
Yeah,
because the intimacy is more than just what happens in the bedroom. It happens what's outside of the bedroom. That emotional connection that we once shared begins to get affected, because when you're stuck in that mud, what happens when we're stuck in the mud? I've never been stuck in the mud, but when you're, but you know what? I mean, yes, there was one time I didn't personally get stuck in the mud. I was with somebody who was stuck in the mud. And I can tell you from the experience, not sitting in the driver's seat, you're sitting in the passenger seat, and you're sitting there like, oh my gosh, are we ever going to get out of this? What are we going to, all these thoughts just start happening, right? And those are similar thoughts that can start happening when you're in your relationship.
Yeah. And then I think what starts happening, especially from a guy's perspective, right? So you talk about intimacy. Here's what guys end up doing. You get kind of stuck in this rut, right? You keep doing the same thing over and over again. We've talked about it before. It's like if you buy flowers every Monday, That's sweet. But guess what? It starts to, after a while, not that they don't appreciate it. It just becomes like, okay, are you doing this because you're being thoughtful, or are you doing this because you put it in your phone and you know to do it?
Not only that,
And then what starts to happen, though, is you kind of lose that spark. You're stuck in a rut. And then when it comes time in the intimacy in the bedroom, now all of a sudden you're like, well, why aren't you into it?
Right. That's real.
You know what I mean? It's like, I bought you flowers.
Yeah.
Why aren't you into it? And it's like, dude, spice it up.
Sorry, I'm like, let the man finish. Because you take a break, and I'm like, is he done?
Pause.
I got to work on that. But also what happens is like you could be buying the flowers, or you could be buying other gifts, but if you aren't showing up in other aspects of the relationship,
that's good.
It's just a gift.
That's good.
It's just lip service.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because if you just say I love you, and there's not, saying I love you is wonderful. But if you're just saying it all the time, I love you, I love you, but there's no actions that follow it, then it is kind of like it's lip service.
And what do those actions look like? Those actions look like when I express something that bothers me, what does your follow through look like?
Right.
You know, those are one ways that you can say, hey, I love you, outside of saying the words I love you. Because I love you, you know, when you bring something to my attention that you feel like it's bothering me or bothering you or whatever, you know what? I'm going to work on that. I'm going to show you my intentionality in working on that.
Yeah, I think it's showing the intentionality is good, because I think one tip that you can do, I know this sounds crazy, but sometimes it's like if you write something down in your phone or you write it down, you journal it or whatever, it's accessible for you to look at so that you could say, oh, okay, I remember this. And I try to do that. Like if you bring something up to me, I'll try to jot it down in the notes in my phone. And it's just easier than for me to go, okay, wait, because if I don't put it in front of me, whatever you focus on will change. And so if I don't put it in front of me, then the next thing that starts to happen is I just forget.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, cool, she's not mad anymore.
But that is true. I mean, I think writing down, because I'm going to throw myself out there. There's been times where you have expressed something to me, and I'm like, I got it. I got you. And, you know, your day goes by or days go by and you do forget. And so when you told me that's what you do, first I was like, mad respect. I appreciate that. That shows me that you care.
100%.
But also I was like, okay, Victoria, you need to do that, because, you know, obviously your memory ain't that strong if you can't write it down and you forget. So because I care, I am going to write it down. You know, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to make sure. And if you got to take a screenshot of it and make it as one of your screensavers on your phone, as a way to keep it before you. And listen, offering your partner grace. There are going to be moments where they may not hit the nail on the head every day, but like I said, if you are, if they are showing that they are trying, I think that you can respect that. And, you know, okay, I see that they're trying. I'm not going to, you know, hold you to a standard that I may not be living as well.
Yeah. And you can't just do, it's consistency over a period of time. So you can't just, hey, I remember you told me this one time. It was probably midway through probably our marriage or whatever, but you were like, hey, you used to buy flowers.
Yeah.
You know? And I was like, yeah, it's back in the day. Good times. You know what I mean? We had good times back then. But you're like, I would like flowers.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I was like on it. So I bought flowers immediately. But then guess what happened? There was no consistency over that. So it just kind of fell back into, and the crazy thing is I would walk in the store and be like, I remember when she said she wanted flowers. I'm going to grab these Cheez-Its and I got to get out of here. And so what happens is the consistency doesn't stay, and then it just kind of falls off, and then it goes back to what you said was, then it's like, all right, I shared something with you. You did it for a second. You stopped doing it, and now walls start being built.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, in the moment, I don't think I developed any walls towards you with the flowers thing. It was just something that I noticed. And it wasn't even so much you buying flowers. It was your thoughtfulness behind the flowers. It was the way that you would give me flowers. It was like, okay, like, and he knows this. I've told him this before. Like, my favorite all-time bouquet of flowers that you ever gave me is, so my favorite color is like lavender, and I love calla lilies. And so there's one particular time you gave me a bouquet of flowers that was like calla lilies, roses, daisies, but they were all lavender. And it was the most beautiful. But while it was the most beautiful like bouquet that I've ever seen, your attention to detail and remembering those things and just adding that little flavor in there, I was just like, oh, or like, how, huh?
Nailed it.
Or like, one time when I left work, you had a bouquet of flowers laying on my windshield with a note, "Hey, thinking of you." So when I came out of my job after a long day, like it was those things. It wasn't just so much the flowers; it was the way you gave the flowers. So if you are going to give flowers consistently, spice up the flowers, spice up the way you do it. Make it different. So think outside the box. You know what I mean?
Now I just text you and I'm like, "Hey, will you pick up food on your way home?"
You went from texting thinking of you beautiful to, "Hey, Will, before if you have time,
hey, can you help?
you mind stopping by?" Or your favorite thing, which I have learned and I don't mind it, but it's like when you're like, "Hey, babe, I have this new idea. I'm gonna make this thing." And before, when he'd be like, "I got this recipe, babe, I'm going to make it for you." And I'm like, okay, now I know after 18 going on 19 years when you say that, that's code for you going to help me make this recipe.
Because I think of stuff or I see stuff on TikTok and I'm like, "Oh, that looks so good." And then I go and get all the stuff for it. And then she's like, "What are you making?" I'm like, "Well, I saw something.
Yeah.
I think you can do.
Well,
if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish."
Well, the thing is so he started out where I'm going to make this recipe without your help because he was trying to be sweet and thoughtful and make dinner because he knows I make the dinner majority of the time. So he was trying to be sweet and thoughtful, but God bless his heart. Outside of making like spaghetti, grilling, and hot dogs, pizza. Anything beyond that is not his.
Chicken. I've got chicken.
Yeah, you have. You did. You made some good chicken the other day. But that, that's where it caps.
Yeah, it caps.
That's where it caps. Yeah. So when you bring me these recipes and you're like, "Oh, I'm going to make these recipes." I'm like, okay. You get to a spot where he struggles. Like he's like, babe, I think it's burning. Babe, it doesn't taste right. So then he's like, "Can you please help?" So now I know, if we want this to be edible, he gonna need my assistance.
Yeah. It's like the other day where I bought a wok.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how to use the thing.
And I was
I'm looking up recipes and I'm like, "I think you can do this." But here's the thing though is, you talk about communication. That's great communication.
Yeah. And I was like, joke's on you because I've never used the wok either. So we're gonna have to walk through this together. That was a good one. That was a good one.
Great joke. Here's the point, though. It is something that it's like I communicated.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Hey, look." And it does. You talk about not staying in a rut. That is one of the things that I've learned. It's like, hey, yes, I'm communicating something to her that's a benefit for the whole family. But it is not getting stuck in a rut. It keeps things spontaneous.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need to talk about is keeping things spontaneous. It can't just be the same thing over and over.
Yes.
Spice it up a little bit. Do something different.
Yeah.
When we started the podcast, I totally forgot that we went on a date.
Yeah.
Right? But it's like, it was because it was something so different.
Yeah. You forgot about it?
I forgot about it.
Okay. If that's the excuse you want to give.
But you got to spice things up a little bit. It cannot be the same thing over and over and over. Yeah. It'll get boring.
Yeah, it will. It really, really will. And I think also it's like not just spontaneity, but remembering the why.
Oh, that's
You know what I mean? Like why we fell in love, why we are so compatible, why we are so good together. And don't stop having fun. Like if your relationship has gotten to a place where you feel like it's more work than fun, and I know marriage is work, but 100%. When I used to hear marriage is work, I used to be like, "Oh, that's not fun." But I see it now as more of like, no, because I care about this thing, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure it's healthy and it thrives. That's where the work sits. So it comes from a place of pleasure, not from a place of But like, keep it fun. Keep it fun in your relationship. Like he said, being spontaneous, laugh, find a movie and laugh together, do something that it brings the joy back into your relationship. So remembering your why.
Yeah, and it can be small little things. Sometimes people think it has to be something that's like, oh, we're taking a trip to Vegas, which is great, by the way. But if you constantly come home after work and you do the same routine over and over, and it's the same thing every single time, maybe change it up.
Yeah.
Go to a store.
Yeah.
Go, you know what I mean? Take your spouse and take your wife. Tell her, hey, we're going to go grab, dinner somewhere, or even if it's with the family, go grab dinner somewhere and go walk the mall.
Yeah.
Go do something that's something different.
Yeah.
To spice things up a little bit.
Yeah. And don't take advantage of your partner. Like, you
That's
you can
good.
kind of fall into this familiarity of, oh, that's just him, or that's just her, or he come home at this time, so whoop-de-whoop, whatever. When you come home, I try to still be like, hey, babe, hug you, kissing you.
Yeah.
How was your day? Oh, my gosh, bringing excitement, because not only are you making sure, like, or just saying, like, little things like, hey, when he is trying, when I do see that you're trying to make an effort after things that we have communicated on, hey, I see that you're doing that, and I really appreciate that, and that makes me feel like I'm being heard. I want to say thank you for that, because if you bring it to their attention and then it's like another thing and another thing, you don't want to be nagging, you know what I mean? And then they feel like they can't win, and then after a while they may be like, screw it, why even try? So bringing the appreciation back toward each other as partners. Hey, I appreciate that you're a stay-at-home mom and that you work hard. You may not go physically collect a paycheck, but you giving the time and investing in our children and developing them and growing them and sacrificing what you sacrifice, and vice versa. Hey, I appreciate that you work as many hours as you do, and sometimes you're not able to make everything that we do, but I appreciate the sacrifice, and we're going to celebrate you as much as we can in that, and vice versa.
Yeah. And I think it's good. There's so many different ways. Like, we can give you tips on there's so many different ways. There's by text.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if you send the same text every morning, love you, have a great day. Love you, have a great day. It's not, after a while, it's going to fall. But taking a moment and just sending a text that really shows how much you appreciate them. This doesn't matter if you've been married for 6 months, 6 years, 16 years, whatever it is. Taking that moment to it'll take you 30 seconds. Get a text and say, hey, I appreciate this, this, and this, and this, and this about you.
Yeah.
Not so much what you do for me, just who you are as a person.
Yeah, that's good. Because sometimes we can do that. Be like, you so awesome because you do this, this, and this, and this, and this.
Right.
Instead
Thank
of
you for always cooking the meals that I come up with. Thank you for, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You got to be like, listen, I thank you for you being you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for you being you. Or, hey, I believe in you. I think you're going to do amazing things, like encouraging your partner, letting them know that, hey, you, out of everybody, I'm your biggest fan. Okay, I am the fan club.
Right.
Point blank, period.
Right. So I think that's key as we're wrapping up. It's one of those things. Couple things. If you're stuck in a rut, you got to do something different.
Yes.
Go try something different. Do something different.
Yes.
Don't keep the same schedule, the same routine all the time.
Yes.
Do something different.
Yes.
Guys, listen to me. Try something different.
Yes.
If you're not a flower guy, go buy flowers.
Yeah.
If you're not a card guy, a random card.
Yeah.
You could do that. Mix it up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Bring the communication back. Bring the date nights back. Bring the intimacy back, not just in the bedroom, but outside the bedroom. Those are ways as well.
Yeah. Think outside the box. And here's a crazy thing. I know this sounds like whatever. Google it.
Yeah. Google date night ideas. Google free date night ideas.
Right.
Google spontaneous date night ideas. Think outside the box in that way as well. So.
Yeah. And it's like, hey, go for a walk in the park. You're like, I don't like walking. Then go for a drive.
Yeah.
Like, do something that just lets them know that I don't want to stay in the same thing over and over.
Yeah. And so maybe the beginning of that conversation, if you feel like, my relationship maybe has fallen in a rut, let's have that conversation with our partner. Hey, I feel like I feel like our relationship is kind of falling in a rut because, listen, it's happened to the best of us. It happened to Phil and I. Absolutely. Yeah. Like, hey, we bored.
Big time.
So it's like, let's have that conversation. Let's make sure we, bring our friendship back. If you feel like you have lost it, hey, we were friends first. Like, let's bring our friendship back to the forefront of our relationship. Let's make sure we consistently fall in love with each other. We consistently choose each other by doing these things.
Yep. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this podcast. We're so grateful for you guys for sharing it, for liking it. We love the feedback that you guys give us too.
Absolutely. And if you haven't already, check out our YouTube. We have Love Encompassed podcast on YouTube, where if you're not able to listen to our podcast on Apple or Spotify, you can also watch this episode as well. And if you are watching currently, make sure you subscribe. And if this is something that you feel like has not only benefited you, but someone that you may know, make sure you share it with a friend, share it with a spouse, or share it with a spouse's friends. That's what I'm trying to say. Make sure you share, if you feel like it can be a help to somebody else as well.
Yep, you can follow us on Love Encompass Podcast on Instagram, as well as you can follow Victoria and I on Instagram on our own Instagram pages. But thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye.